Man, that is a good article. Oh, hey there, fight fans. I'm Michael Montero for Boxing Monthly. You're watching the Neutral Corner for the week of July 2nd. A lot of news and notes to cover, so let's get right into it. Okay, so do we start with the good news or do we start with the bad news? Let's start with the bad news. Why not? Buzzkill. Fury-Klitschko rematch has been postponed, not canceled, but postponed. Look, for some of you, this might be good news because the first fight was horrible and there's a lot of you guys out there who just aren't fans of Klitschko or Fury. But I do think a lot of people were looking forward to this rematch. I actually think most people seem to have this viewpoint, and I do, that the rematch is going to be better than the first fight, especially the atmosphere, because it was scheduled to be over there in Manchester, and the crowds over in the UK are just way more lively than the crowds over in Germany. You'd think you're at a funeral sometimes with some of those German crowds. But this fight was postponed because Tyson Fury apparently injured his left ankle. Here's a picture he tweeted. This is something I pulled off of Twitter here. I don't know how legit the injury is because I'm sure you guys saw, not even a week later, there were videos and photos of Tyson Fury out at some festival or something outdoors at night getting piss drunk with a bunch of fans and dancing around and screaming and hollering. So maybe he was trying to kill the pain, I don't know. But look, the things that I'm hearing about this fight is that the ticket sales were not going very well. I don't know if that's related to the whole Brexit thing in the UK and if people were sitting on their money, or if there's just too much uncertainty, or the fact that you got the Olympics coming up, you've got, of course, football season's in full swing, I believe. So, there's just a lot going on in the world of sports, and maybe people just weren't ready to buy their tickets, and maybe that had something to do with this. The real shame is that Tyson Fury, whether you love him or hate him, he's a character. Along with Adrian the Problem Broner here in the United States, he's the biggest character in boxing, I'd say, he's a lot bigger. He's about 2 or 3 of Adrian Broner, so he is literally the biggest character in boxing. And more than that, he is the legitimate heavyweight champion of the world, and he hasn't fought since last, November? Was it October or November last year, I think, the first Klitschko-Fury fight took place. Neither has fought since. I don't think the world's missing Vladimir Klitschko that much right now, but the heavyweight champion hasn't fought yet, and we're almost in July. That's not cool. So hopefully the ankle gets healed up and they can restructure the ticket prices or whatever, and hopefully it stays location and venue-wise over there in Manchester. That could possibly change, though, depending on the negotiations and everything else and the timeline of when they want to make this fight. Hey, this thing could be postponed until November or December of this year. There's some fights that are possibly going to get made over there in the UK coming up in the fall. We'll talk a little bit about that in a second. That could affect the rescheduling of a Fury-Klitschko rematch. So more to come about this one, but definitely a buzzkill. More negative news. The whole Canelo Triple G situation, right? And guys, I've made videos about this. I've talked about it here on this series and in other platforms. I never thought this fight was going to happen this year, but now it's pretty much been substantiated from Tom Loeffler himself and from Oscar De La Hoya himself. They've both said that there's basically a handshake verbal agreement for those two to fight, not next May, but next September, which for me is the expiration date of this fight. If it doesn't happen by then, I don't think it's ever going to happen because fans have had enough. I've explained also that I didn't think it was going to happen this year, and I was cool with that if certain things take place between now and then. Well, it doesn't look like my suggestions or other people's suggestions. A lot of you guys have the same suggestions I do for Golden Boy to build Canelo up. Doesn't look like they listen to any of that shit, because it's been confirmed he's fighting Liam Smith September 17th in Las Vegas for Smith's 154-pound junior middleweight title. Now, here's why, again, from a PR perspective, Golden Boy and Canelo have completely mishandled this entire thing. I don't know what the hell their business plan is at this point. They're basically being outperformed. Golden Boy Boxing is being outperformed right now by the PBC. Yeah, I said it because it's true, okay? Canelo said, first he invites Golovkin up into the ring after he knocks out Amir Khan. Then he said, oh, well, I'm going to dump the WBC title because I don't want to be defined by a sanctioning body's rules. Something like that, right? I'm paraphrasing here. And then he goes and signs up to fight for a title in his very next fight. So what the hell are you doing fighting for a title after you just dumped one and said you don't want to be held down by a sanctioning body's rules, right? And then more than that, that fighters love titles and it helps them market fights. I'm not even worried about the damn title. The part that really gets me is in the whole press release from Canelo and from Golden Boy, in their communications with us in the media, you know, they've been saying, look, yes, we're going to fight Golovkin next September, but between now and then, we're going to build up Canelo at 160 pounds. We're going to take our time and build him up between now and then so that he's an established, full-fledged middleweight. Well, they were fighting at 155. Now they're dropping off an extra pound and officially leaving the middleweight division and fighting at junior middleweight. So I do not understand this move. Now, the onus eventually is going to be on the folks at Ring Magazine, and Doug Fisher has talked about this. We shot some episodes of 10 Count for UCN Live just yesterday at the studio in Santa Monica. And Doug was talking about this because you guys know he works for Ring Magazine, which is owned by Golden Boy Promotions. That Ring, they're going to be on the hook eventually here, and they're going to have to contemplate whether they want to strip Canelo Alvarez of his linear middleweight title that he won from Miguel Cotto last year. Here's the thing. He just technically defended the linear middleweight title, even though we can argue the legitimacy of that defense, but technically it was within the rules, a defense against Amir Khan, right? Back in, the beginning of May. So that defense will probably last him for a year. But if he doesn't defend that damn linear championship by next May, the Ring Magazine might strip his ass. And if they don't, the fans, you guys on social media that pay attention to this stuff, the diehard fans, they're going to let Golden Boy have it. Now, here's how you guys can make a difference right now. And Steve Kim actually talked about this as well on 10 Count yesterday while we were filming this. He said this several times. Hit these guys in the wallet. That's how you fight back. This Canelo Smith fight is going to be a pay-per-view. There are going to be good undercard fights. I can't tell you guys yet because it's kind of off the record, but I could tell you there's going to be some names you want to see on this undercard. They're going to try to stack this undercard so you guys will buy the fight. Unless they seriously discount the cost of this pay-per-view or something, if they want to charge you another $80 for this, protest, man. Don't buy the damn fight, okay? Don't let them get away with this. Force them, hit them in the wallet, force them to take that hit and force them to hear your voice. Because all the tweets going back and forth, they really don't pay attention to that crap. Trust me. They know it's out there, they see it, but there's always haters on Twitter. And that's just the way that they interpret that. But when they get hit in the wallet, they will feel it. Now, the other half of this Canelo Triple G thing, Gennady Golovkin, the rumor is he might be fighting Eubank Jr. over in the UK. Eubank Jr. just got a win last weekend against the journeyman fighter. I'll talk more about that in a second, but he clearly called out Gennady Golovkin after the fight. He made it very, very clear. There was no Twitter thing like Billy Joe Saunders has been doing or like Irizlandi Lara has been doing. It was straight up dead on balls looking into the camera and calling out Gennady Golovkin. Tom Loeffler and K2 and Team Golovkin, they've made it very, very clear. They will go over to the UK. So the rumor is that this is going to be late August, early September. It's dependent on when the Brook-Vargas fight is finally official and signed, okay? Speaking of which, Jesse Vargas has signed the dotted line for that fight with Kell Brook. He's agreed to go over to the UK in the whole nine. Kell Brook still is not signed for that fight. Now look, man, I think Kell Brook is probably the best welterweight in the world. He decisively beat Shawn Porter, much more decisively than Keith Thurman did. I'll talk about that in a second. But he hasn't done shit since then, and he's trying to price himself out of this fight. Apparently, he's upset that Jesse Vargas is getting paid so well. But yo, Kell Brook, listen. Vargas agreed to come over to the UK and fight in your backyard and unify titles with you in your backyard. You hold every advantage in this promotion. Your commission, your fans, your venue, all of it. So yeah, he's going to get paid more. You know, you got to bite the bullet somewhere, man. You can't have it all your way. Guys, let's be real here. Kell Brook has one big win in his career. One top 5 welterweight legitimate win in his career, and that's it. He is in no place to make the kind of demands he's starting to make, and he's turning into a diva. He needs to sign the dotted line and face Jesse Vargas. Vargas, for his part, has done everything he is supposed to do here. This is all on Kell Brook if it ain't going to happen, okay? More rumors about fights coming up. They're talking about Manny Pacquiao and Adrian the Problem Broner fighting in October, I believe October 15th. And this is more than just a rumor because Top Rank has put a hold on Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas for October 15th. So this is a very real possibility. I think this is going to come down to Pacquiao. We know that Bob Arum and Al Heyman recently patched things up, and they're willing to work together. I think they've both had financial difficulties this year. We know Bob Arum lost over $10 million with that Pacquiao-Bradley card earlier this year. So he's hurting. We know the PBC's been hurting. So these guys have been making deals with rival promoters to try to get some money flowing for their promotional companies. So we know Arum wants it. We know Heyman wants it. I'm damn sure that Adrian Broner wants it. It's up to Manny Pacquiao. Look, I never believed that fight with Bradley would be his last professional fight. I know he's coming back, just like we know Floyd Mayweather's coming back. So it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. Does Manny want to come back this year? He did win the Senate over there in the Philippines. He was officially sworn in, so he's a senator over there. Does he have the motivation and the willingness to train, to get ready, to come over here and fight on October 15th? If this thing comes off, it's actually a very interesting matchup. Now look, if these two fought 3 or 4 years ago, Manny Pacquiao would knock Broner out in 4 or 5 rounds. Wouldn't even be close. But at this point of Pacquiao's career, he is so faded. Look, against Bradley earlier this year, he was super motivated for that fight and had a very, very good camp. One of his best camps in a long time because he wanted to grab that W and close out that series with Bradley. It was actually very important to him. But this situation is totally different. And I'm not sure that he's going to be 100% up for that fight if it happens, which makes it all the more interesting. And, you know, a lot of people are groaning because if Pacquiao comes back, if Mayweather comes back, you know, we're ready to turn the page, right? We're ready to turn the page on those careers. And I've talked about that. But mark my words, if this fight happens, the pay-per-view will outsell the Kovalev-Ward pay-per-view and the Crawford-Postal pay-per-view combined. And it will easily outsell Pacquiao's pay-per-view earlier this year with Bradley and Mayweather's pay-per-view with Berto last year. So more to come with that. Let's see. Other news and notes. Errol Spence is fighting Leonard Bundu August 21st. That is a regression from the Algieri win. So it kind of sucks when you see a young fighter like this who is about to really take off. He had a really explosive performance, matched up against Leonard Bundu, who is really, really difficult to look good against. I want to say Keith Thurman. Was it Thurman who fought him recently? There's a couple guys, a couple of the PBC guys that have fought him recently and just didn't look good against him. Style-wise, not a good look. But I will say this. He'll go rounds and he will give Errol Spence some much-needed experience. So in that respect, not a bad matchup. Let's see, what else? Richard Schaefer, the con man. He's back, starting a new company, Ringstar Sports. And no doubt, he's going to be in business with Al Heyman at some point. He's going to be in business with Floyd Mayweather when he makes that 50th fight, which I still don't think is going to happen this year. I think it's going to happen next year when more things open up. And, man, Tricky Dick, that's what they call Richard Schaefer, man. I don't know, this guy, a little shady, kind of scares me. He's done some dirty, dirty things in this sport, man. He's also done some very, very big things in this sport. So two ways to look at it, right? Real quick ratings talk. Thurman Porter does a really, really good rating. You know, and I'll talk more about this fight in a minute here, but, you know, I've been critical of the PBC's ratings for good reason, but this was an example of a fight. I think its peak was 2.6. It did a 2.6. And for you guys who don't understand the way these ratings works, basically these Nielsen ratings, they take an estimate. I think the most recent estimate, it's about, there's about 120 million TV households in the USA. That's how they word it. So a household with a television. There might be one person watching that TV. There might be a dozen people watching that TV. But about 120 million households, TV households in America. And they take 1 point of that 120 million would be, I guess, 1.2 million people, or 1.2 million houses are watching that event. So if something does a 1 point rating, just think that 1.2 million households, 1.2 million TVs, and of course these are estimates, but 1.2 million TVs were turned on to that event, okay? So this does a 2.6, I think that was the peak rating. I think it started at a 2 when the fight started, or maybe when the card started, and it progressively built. And during the main event, again, the peak was 2.6. Considering some of the other things that were going on, I think there was some early Olympics coverage. I think there was some Major League Baseball that day. That's a pretty respectable rating, man. And, you know, I got to give it to PBC all around. Again, I'll talk more about this fight in a second, but from a promotional standpoint, I saw Porter and Thurman on ESPN that week. I think they were on like Sports Center and First Take and all those morning shows and stuff. I've been asking to get those guys on the late shows and some of the other shows at the networks that PBC does business. Again, this was a CBS fight. So it would have been great to see those guys on CBS a little bit. But just the fact that they were on ESPN the week of the fight promoting it, that's not something we've seen from PBC. So look, these are two articulate American fighters, Keith Thurman, Shawn Porter. They do very well on camera. They're likable guys with intriguing personalities. Shawn Porter's more of the good guy, nice guy. Keith Thurman's more of the hippie, kind of out there, kind of left field kind of guy. But they did a good job promoting this fight. And holy shit, imagine that. It did a quality rating. And on top of all that, it was a really, really good fight. So you got something good here, guys. PBC, Al Heyman, all of you got a good thing going here. Let's take this little gold nugget and let's build upon it. Last Friday, we had an upset special in Beijing, China, as Jason Sosa scores an 11th round TKO over Javier Fortuna. Sosa was losing the fight at the time of the stoppage. After 10 rounds, the judges had Fortuna ahead 96-91, 95-92, and 94-93. This was for Fortuna's WBA 130-pound title. Sosa is now 19-1-4 with 15 knockouts. You guys, of course, remember him from last, I think, December when he fought Nicholas Walters. And most people thought Nicholas Walters clearly won that fight. But Sosa got, I think it was a majority draw. It ended up being a draw. So I think that fight helped position him to get this fight. And I'm not 100% sure why I was over there in China. I guess the promoter they had a card over there and they just shipped this fight over there. But Fortuna does have a rematch clause in the contract. So a rematch is more than likely going to happen, and I would imagine it'll be over here in the US somewhere, probably not in China, but you never know, it might go back over there. For Sosa, look man, if he can beat Fortuna again, I don't know. I mean, mentally, he was being outboxed and losing the fight, but sometimes when you see a guy get knocked out early in a fight like that, there's just this mental thing that hangs over him. I'm not so sure though. Fortuna was controlling the fight to me, and he wore down late. So I think there was an issue with stamina there. Maybe he didn't travel well over to China, I don't know. But maybe in the rematch, he would take conditioning more serious, he would pace himself more, and he wins the rematch. Either way, you know, I mentioned this fight and I bring it up because it was an upset special, but more than that, the 130-pound division is hot, and I want to see some unification, and so does Vasyl Lomachenko, who's probably the best fighter in the division right now, and he would love to get a crack at Jason Sosa, but he's probably going to rematch Fortuna, so that will be on the shelf for a while. But, you know, Sosa did fight Walters, as I mentioned, last year on HBO. And so if he were somehow to, take this title again in the rematch, hold on to it, you got to figure the boys at HBO are going to be ponying up some dough to get him in there with Lomachenko for a unification fight. But of course, everybody's talking about the fights Saturday. Let's start over in the UK. There was a big card over in O2 Arena. Man, Hearn stacks these cards over there. He just gets it. He just gets it, man. And I know he talks a lot of shit, and he's a promoter, and all promoters, you know, they are what they are. But man, say what you will about the guy, he puts on events, man. George Groves scores a very, very wide unanimous decision over Martin Murray. 118-110 3 times. Those are the scores. And Groves is now 24-3 with 18 knockouts. He looked improved in this fight. What I don't know is if it was Groves improving, looking better than he's looked the last couple years, or is it just that Murray has declined that much? Murray missed weight on the first attempt at the weigh-in, had to weigh in again and made the weight, but you know, maybe that killed him. It's interesting, man. Murray killed himself for so long to make 160 pounds, and now he's fighting at 168 and he missed weight. So he just might be one of those guys that's just not aging well. For Groves, look, I favored him to win this fight by decision, but I figured this fight would be closer. So I was surprised. The fight started slowly. And, you know, looking back, I guess that played into what Groves wanted to do. And he just stacked up early rounds and really took over late in the fight. It really closed very strong. And there were some exciting moments. There were actually some moments where both guys got buzzed. And, I think Murray obviously got the worst of it. But Murray caught Groves a couple times. It made for some exciting exchanges. But this is pretty much a one-sided fight. It'll be interesting to see where Groves goes from here. Also on that card, Eubank Jr. scores a 4th-round TKO over Tom Dorn. He is now 23-1 with 18 knockouts. That lone loss to Billy Joe Saunders in a fight where, I think that Eubank Jr.'s stock has risen more than Saunders since that fight. Saunders got a title, but Eubank Jr. got a lot of experience and has continued to build upon that experience. And dare I say, if there was a rematch tomorrow, I'm going with Eubank all the way in that fight. He's just progressed more because he's actually gotten in the damn ring and fought people. And look, Tom Duran, not a big name, right? Obviously, this was kind of a stay busy fight. But Eubank Jr. did what he had to do. He did what you're supposed to do against that level of opponent. And what I loved more than all of it, he dominated the fight, dropped Dorn in the 3rd round, 3 times in the 4th round. The ref finally waved it off. I didn't like some of the showboating and trash talking. It's one thing to showboat when you're in there with a, guy who's somewhat on your level. But when the levels, are like this, and you're showboating against a guy who's not even in your class, it looks kind of douchey. But that's just, Eubank Jr. is kind of a character, right? And he's just a really cocky, kind of brash type of dude. And I appreciate that. I appreciate that about him. And after the fight, the commentators got up in the ring and interviewed him, and he clearly called out Gennady Golovkin. And like I talked about earlier, Team Triple G is willing to come over to the UK. Obviously, Golovkin would be heavily favored in that fight. Obviously, Eubank is not ready for a matchup like that. And he may not have been ready for the fight with Saunders, right? But he took the damn fight, and he wants to make this fight. I love that about this kid. We need more of that in boxing. We really could use more of that in boxing. He almost, I'm reminiscent of David Lemieux, where David Lemieux, it's not the exact same thing, obviously, but David Lemieux last year grabbed a world title, and he could have sat on that world title and fought in Montreal and fought a few cans and just made millions of dollars. But he went and took the fight with Gennady Golovkin, and he fought in New York. And Lemieux's stock has risen since then. And he's going to be in line for another big fight by the end of this year, if things go the way that I'm hearing. Eubank Jr. is the same principle. He's not going to travel over to America. Let's not get crazy. He wants to have some advantages. And the fact that Golovkin would be traveling and fighting on the road in harsh territory makes me think that it gives Eubank Jr. a lot more confidence, and it makes the fight a lot more interesting. But I absolutely welcome that fight, man. No one else wants to fight the guy. And Eubank Jr. and his dad and his whole team, they are just brash and cocky enough and a little bit of crazy enough to make this thing interesting. Sign me up if it does happen. The main event, Anthony Joshua scores a 7th round TKO over Dominic Breazeale. AJ is now 17-0, 17 knockouts. He dropped Breazeale twice in the 7th. And I tweeted a few times during this fight. It was interesting. By about the 4th, 5th round, Breazeale was starting to actually make Joshua think a little bit. And Joshua, he didn't look panicked or anything like that, but you could tell he was a little put off because he is used to people going down from the headshots he was landing. And he was throwing combinations, 4, 5, 6 punch combinations on the inside. Heavyweights don't do that shit. When you're a man that is as big as Joshua is, and you're throwing that many punches, hard punches, on a big target like that, it makes you tired. And by about the 4th or 5th round, Anthony Joshua was huffing and puffing. I can't remember if it was the end of the 4th or the 5th, where he sat down in his stool and he plopped down. And he was breathing out of his mouth. And Breazeale kind of just calmly walked to his corner and sat down. And at that point, it was very, very interesting because I remember thinking, we're going to see here what Joshua really has. He has to make an adjustment here. Is he going to panic? What's going to go on? Because you could see the momentum of the fight changing a little bit. He was never in any trouble, so don't get me wrong, guys. Don't start jumping all over me. But you know what I'm saying. When you have a prospect, and let's be clear about this, Anthony Joshua is a prospect with a title. Nothing more. He's not a champion, a top-level heavyweight yet. He's still in development. But when you see guys, prospects, hit these little milestones, you don't always know how they're going to react. Joshua reacted perfectly. He slowed down his attack. He backed off. And he started working the body. I remember tweeting out, you would think AJ would throw to the body a little more with such a big guy in front of him with a soft midsection who was, absorbing all the headshots. And man, he must have telepathically got my tweet because he immediately, it was the fifth, I think the sixth round, started throwing hard body shots and got Breazeale to drop his arms, one, but also got Breazeale huffing and puffing, and then got Breazeale thinking. And all Breazeale was really doing the first 3 rounds or so was just eating punches. But Breazeale actually started throwing and landing some punches in the 4th and 5th round. Nothing major, but he was actually landing shots. But suddenly when Joshua slowed down and just started working behind the jab, and he threw a couple hard right hands to the body, a couple left hooks, suddenly Breazeale's offense went completely blank, and he was completely in his head and completely defensive. By the 7th round, Breazeale had dropped his hands, and then, it was just a matter of time. Once Joshua hit him, I believe it was, straight right, clipped him, hurt him, immediately jumped on the guy, knocked him down, and then the second knockdown. One thing about Joshua, man, he's a killer. He's a finisher. And after that, the ref, waved it off. The fight was over. Breazeale, let me say this much. And I tweeted this too. Al Haymon should take half of Charles Martin's purse from that fight earlier this year and give that money to Dominic Breazeale. Whatever Dominic Breazeale got paid in this fight, and from what I'm hearing, it wasn't nearly as much as Charles Martin got paid, obviously, because Martin had a title. But it was a fraction of what Martin got. Whatever Breazeale got paid, it wasn't enough. He really, really earned his money. And he showed that, look, he doesn't really have very good craft. He's very slow. Anthony Joshua's hand speed was so much faster than Breazeale. But man, Breazeale's got heart, and he had a game plan, and he stuck to it. And for a while there, it was starting to kind of play out a little bit. So, Breazeale, he's not a top 10 heavyweight or anything, but I'd like to see him again. Why not? Let's see Dominic Breazeale in there with some of these other prospects coming up. I think it can only be good to see things like that. This guy has earned another payday, in my opinion. For Joshua, it's interesting. Deontay Wilder was part of the Showtime crew they were in the studio just commenting about the fight. And Deontay, of course, talked about a potential matchup, and people have been asking Anthony Joshua about a matchup with Deontay Wilder. In fact, they asked him right after the fight. And Anthony Joshua, very, very intelligently, very astutely, said, look, we're going to fight, but it's going to be down the road. Exactly the way Canelo Alvarez should have handled the situation with Gennady Golovkin. So Team Canelo, you could learn a thing or two from Team Joshua. But Joshua is almost like a politician. Very, very polished, knows exactly what to say. His response was perfect. Basically, hey man, I like Wilder. He's a good heavyweight. We'll eventually fight. There you go, man. That's all we want to hear from Joshua right now. For my money, if Wilder and Joshua fought right now, Wilder would knock Anthony Joshua out. Yeah, I said it. I know, go ahead and throw shit at me, British fight fans. Joshua's not ready for that fight, man. Maybe Wilder wouldn't knock him out, but he would absolutely win by decision. Wilder has shown that he's very, very good at using his length, his athleticism. His hand speed and strength is right up there with Joshua. His size, his height, he probably has longer arms, and he's much more fluid in the upper body than Joshua is. Joshua's gotten better, but he still is a little stiff for me, a little too much with the muscles, and he could probably just stick to cardio more. But what I want to see from Joshua next is just get in the ring in another 2 or 3 months. And would not surprise me if we see AJ fight Gerald Washington next. Hearn and Haymon got this thing going where Haymon's sending his undefeated heavyweights over there to the UK to fight Joshua. They're getting paid very well. Everyone's happy. So it'd be interesting to see if Gerald Washington, who is probably the best of the Martin, Breazeale, Washington little trio of these undefeated American Al Haymon heavyweights, it'll be interesting to see what he brings. The one thing about Washington is he fights very, very intelligently. He's a very, very smart, mature fighter for his age. Actually, he's actually old compared to other fighters, other heavyweight prospects. But for the level of fights he has, he thinks a lot. But he too, like Joshua, is kind of stiff. Probably a lot more stiff, to be honest. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in that fight. But let's talk about the fight over here in America, man. Thurman and Porter, very, very good fight. Very good fight. And you guys know by now that Thurman won a decision, 115 to 113, 3 times. That's exactly how I scored the fight. I don't know why the crowd was booing. It's one thing if you think Porter won, and I know there's a lot of people out there who do, but to boo like this was some kind of robbery, that's ridiculous. And it kind of shows that there were probably a lot of fans there at the venue that were casual fans. Because I don't think diehard fight fans would boo that decision. It was a legitimate decision. But I say this was a good fight and not a great fight because there's a lot of people talking, and it started with the commentary crew, the Showtime commentary crew, because this was Showtime boxing on CBS. The commentary crew did a very, very good job. The Showtime guys are just a lot better than the regular PBC guys. But they started bringing up, the notion that this was the fight of the year. And then a lot of people on Twitter took to it. And then a lot of the YouTube channels and stuff that are PBC palm wavers and I'm going to say it, demographic related, started kind of towing that political line. Look, guys, this fight, Thurman Porter, was a fight of the year candidate. And on a very, very weak year of fights, it would maybe have a chance at being fight of the year. But it was not on the same level, on the same stratosphere as what Francisco Vargas and Orlando Salido did just a few weeks back. It just isn't, okay? It wasn't. Just the amount of punches thrown and landed was hundreds more. Salido and Vargas threw, I want to say it was 300 or 400 more punches. They landed, I think, over 200, maybe 300 more total punches. And I get it. Punch numbers aren't everything, but it's an indication that there was more sustained action throughout. And I've heard some of the typical YouTube people saying that Thurman Porter was better because it was more skilled. There was more slickness. You kind of using those code words, take from that what you will, but to say that that fight had more skill and craft than Vargas Salido is just flat out incorrect. It didn't. When it comes to the infighting, Vargas Salido, the skill in that fight was far superior to the infighting we saw with Thurman Porter. Now, the outside fighting, working behind the jab, some of the stuff that Keith Thurman was doing, and some of the stuff Shawn Porter was doing that impressed me. Shawn Porter was landing jabs from the outside. That's something we haven't seen him do. So it shows, one, that Thurman can be beat by a guy who knows how to jab, but it also, number 2, shows that Porter has really worked on that aspect of his game because that's something he just did not do against Kell Brook during that fight last year. So he stepped up his game. And Thurman, to his credit, stepped up his game. So some of that skill and heart that was on display was really, really good, elite level stuff. But there were lulls in the Thurman Porter fight. And there were some huge defensive liabilities, particularly from Porter, but also from Thurman, man. Thurman got hit with shots. He got hit with left hooks when they were kind of like exchanging on the inside, and Thurman would pull straight back out. And there were times where Thurman would lunge in and Porter would catch him with left hooks as well. So coming in and coming out, he was getting hit with left hooks that I don't think a lot of people, maybe the judges didn't see, the commentators obviously didn't see it because I didn't hear them talking about it much. But I could see it where they weren't necessarily snapping Thurman's head back, but they were landing. If you looked at Thurman's face, man, he was beat up after that fight. Porter was getting nailed with hard counter punches. Thurman was landing the uppercut at will. He was landing straight right hands, and he was landing left hooks as well. He was landing them from all angles, from close and from outside, mostly from outside, but there were liabilities in that fight. And, you know, some of you out there have said that Thurman Porter was better defensively than Vargas Salido. I completely disagree. Again, look at the punch numbers. And again, punch numbers aren't everything. But I believe both fighters landed upwards of 35, 40% of their total punches. In a defensive masterclass, fighters aren't landing 35, 40% of their punches. They're not landing 40+% of their power punches, right? They're not landing 25 or so percent of their jabs. In a really, really good defensive, crafty type of fight, you see people landing 10%, 15% of their jabs, maybe 20, 25% of their overall punches. So this wasn't a defensive masterclass, and obviously Vargas Salido wasn't either. But man, the two-way sustained action in that fight, the craft, the adjustments both fighters made in that fight, it was just superior to Thurman Porter. End of discussion. All that being said, this was a really, really good fight. And I talked before about how it was promoted pretty well. Wasn't promoted outstandingly, you know, but it was promoted pretty damn well. Better than a lot of American promoters promote fights these days. And they got a good rating. I'm happy for them. Okay, I really, really am, because PBC needed this, man. American boxing needed this. What I found interesting is some of my cousins and friends that I used to work with, like on the East Coast and stuff, that don't really follow boxing. They're more into MMA. They're more casual boxing type fans. They messaged me. They Facebooked me. They texted me just saying like, man, that was a good fight. Holy shit, I want to see more fights like that. I would watch boxing more. And, you know, again, from a casual fight fan perspective, I can see where they get that from. But also, demographics play a part here. And I'm not talking about the demographics, so chill out. When I say demographics, I'm saying that these are two American fighters that speak English. One is from Ohio, one is from Florida. Very relatable to a lot of casual American sports fans. Guys, a lot of Americans only speak English. I know, it's stupid. Everywhere else around the world, people speak 2 or 3 languages. You know, it's weird, but Vargas Salido, you know, if I'm comparing that fight, Francisco Vargas obviously is a Mexican guy. Salido, born in Mexico, lives in America now, but born in Mexico. So it may not have had the same relatability to the same fans who were watching Thurman Porter. Now take from that what you will, but demographics play a part, man. You know, they do. And so look, there's going to be channels like The Boxing Voice and stuff like that that prefer Thurman Porter for some of the reasons I talked about. And that's fine. That's good for the promotion of American boxing and American fighters. We need more of that. But knowledgeable fight fans in the Boxing Writers Association of America are not going to vote that the fight of the year. The fight of the year is set. It's Vargas Salido. Now, real quick, I'll wrap this up. Next, what's next for both guys? Well, I said I was happy for PBC. I'm happy for Keith Thurman and Shawn Porter. They fought their ass off. They showed some heart, some determination, particularly Thurman, who got hurt to the body in that fight real bad and was reeling for a second there and had to dig a little, right? That was some good stuff from him, man. I think the PBC should do an immediate rematch. Talking about all the things I talked about, the casual fight fans tuning in, the demographic of fans that can relate to these fighters more so than Vargas and Salido. Take from that what you will, but it's a reality. The good rating it did, the promotion it did. ESPN SportsCenter was talking about this fight. So far this week, they've been talking about it, calling it a fight of the year, ESPN. All of that is positive. They should take that and they should do an immediate rematch. As soon as both guys heal up, Thurman has a lot more healing to do with all the cuts and scrapes. But man, if they could do a rematch in like November or something, and put Danny Garcia as the co-feature. put Danny Garcia in there against one of your cannon fodder type PBC guys because he's been inactive, and promote this thing as a double header and promote it as the winner of these two fights unify their titles next spring, in the spring of 2017. That just, it makes so much sense. I don't know how they could do anything other than that. You would think that they would take this and build upon it, because all the people I just talked about that love this fight for whatever reason, good, bad, indifferent, they're going to watch the rematch and they're going to tell a friend, and they're going to tell a friend's cousin and their friend's dog, and they're all going to watch the fight together. And that's how you build things. And then if you have Danny Garcia on the co-feature with his crazy daddy talking a bunch of shit, and you say, look, the winner of these two fights, they both have titles. They're going to unify titles next spring. So stay tuned, fight fans. Man, that's how you build something. And that's how you get networks interested. So, look, there's my 2 cents. Maybe it was 3 or 4 cents. Take what you will from it. Look, there's no real big fights coming up over the next week or so. There was going to be one, but it got postponed, as you guys know. So we're probably going to be on a hiatus for about a week. So I'll see you guys in a couple weeks. We'll be back. But for now, man, I just want to say, guys, thank you for following my channel and following this show. Please, man, I put a lot of heart into this and a lot of time and energy, and so does Tiffany Lamb when she edits these videos and everything. So please spread the word, man. Share these videos, get them out there to people. You guys know that I take this shit seriously, and I'm passionate about it. So I really, really do thank you for riding with me and being patient while we continue to work on improving things and stuff. But please, man, tell a friend, share this channel, get it out there. So have a happy, safe 4th of July holiday, and I'll see you guys in a couple weeks.